We're smooth 98.1 FM. Good morning and welcome to Freshly Pressed. It is time to get into all of the local headlines we served you earlier on, 10 minutes. It is time to get the analysts in to help us get a better understanding of it. And most importantly, get you to bring in your reaction to make it a complete buffet for us this morning as you would send us messages relating to the headlines this morning onto 0809 444 0981 will be where we expect to read your reactions to the newspaper headlines this morning on Freshly Pressed on Smooth 98.1 FM. You can also go well across to YouTube channel, youtube.com/smooth 91 FM Lagos. Leave us a like there, subscribe to the YouTube channel. You miss out on Freshly Pressed or any of our segments on the show, you can always go back there to click and just go over it all over again and then leave comments there for us. But this morning, I've been joined by Oyeyemi Aderibigbe. Good morning to you. And of course, Chibuzor will join us in about a minute shortly. So let's just talk about an angel and snap your fingers, it appears. But good morning to you, Oyeyemi.
Good morning, Omas, and good morning, Lagos. It's a pleasure to be with you this morning.
As we allow Chibuzor to settle in before we say take his good morning across to him, let's get over to the papers now and get us started this morning with the Nation newspaper, where it comes across saying that the federal government organizes national minimum wage review public hearing. That's what the Nation newspaper is saying. And so it seemed like it is time for the renegotiation between the employer now and his employer right now. But one is asking, what is the essence of labor if the federal government needs to take this negotiation or hearing across for a public hearing? Speak to us. Is there a way to subvert labor across the way?
It's a very interesting problem, but it's a necessary conversation. So kudos to the leaders who are organizing this. And I'm very happy that there are public hearings, because what public hearings do is introduce new thoughts, new ideas, and new solutions that those in government may not have thought about. The minimum wage has been an issue for a long time, clearly in need of a total revamp, right? How it works, who it applies to, the context in which it is paid. The current provision of the law is that it's 30,000 naira. That's not a living wage. It can't take anybody home, right? And I don't think that the government is obtuse and doesn't know this, but wages are paid within economic realities, right? And we're a government that is over leveraged, we're in debt, we're not even, we don't even have sufficient income for capital or infrastructural development. We're overstretched in burdens and liabilities. So the question is, where is the money going to come from if we make this commitment? Already, sometime last week, the government talked about crunching the size of government and adhering to the Oyeyemi report. The debate is out there if this would actually be a cost-saving or capital alleviating decision. That's yet to be seen. The mergers and the restructuring is still ongoing, but things like that will get us forward, right? And someone asked me, what is the reasonable amount for a minimum wage? And so we played around numbers. So if government increased to 100,000 today, how many governments and agencies can actually afford to give out 100,000 to their employees as a minimum wage? Even private employers as well, because it also applies, right? We now said, okay, maybe if we double and make it 60, would that be more realistic? It's good. I think we can start there, right? But the question still beckons, within what economic realities, where is the money going to come from? How are we going to, resourcefully adhere to this and ensure that people do get their minimum wage? And these are my solutions. As we increase costs, inflation is abiding with us for now because we remain consumers. right? So I think as we're having these conversations around minimum wage, maybe we should be directly throwing them across the lines of production. Okay, this will be tied to this income. This will be tied to that income, and just creating new income lines for agencies, for government, and even within the private sector. Again, the social gap in our infrastructure is there, right? And government can't afford to carry more weight without increased production. So that's the cost, that's the core issue. And so if we're looking to solve minimum wage, we must directly tie it to an increase in our productivity as a nation. And I think that's only when the conversations will begin to make sense.
So two issues that crop up from this conversation. One, you've raised the issue of capital infrastructure, but then the question is, people must be alive to use this infrastructure. By, if you say this minimum wage is not a living one, I mean, it's not a living wage. So in conversely put, it is a dead wage. So to make it living, but then people must be alive. So is it safe to say, okay, infrastructure might have to, we postpone it and let people survive first? And then add this to it, dig into the paper, we see that these hearings will be held in regions. So as these conversations are being held, different regions of the, that's what geographical locations zones as it's been broken down 6. So is it proper for every region in this country, I mean, geopolitical zones, to earn the same pay? Over to you.
So, I mean, first point around capital infrastructure, right? Remember, I tied it to productivity.
Yeah.
Productivity is resourced by infrastructure. Everyone now has been making jokes around how people will be relocating to Aba because the power problem there has been solved, right? That is infrastructure that will certainly enable productivity. If things go as they should, we would, I mean, that state would not have a problem paying a minimum wage of 200,000, right? Because income would increase if there's productivity, right? It's how much money is available to spend. And you cannot make more money if you have not equipped your capacity to the state of efficiency. We're completely inefficient at this point. So for us to get there, so it's a chicken and egg situation in summary, right? If we are to survive, we must create a system that enables us produce, right? There is no way. We can't stay subsistent. If we stay subsistent, we're gradually dying. So the option is slow death or enhancement, right? That's what it is. Now, speaking to how the regional spread, that's the ideal way to have the conversation because the realities differ across different regions. But what the minimum wage does is calibrated for like a median rate across shared economic realities. That's the ideal situation. So it's a wage that takes account of different things but arrives at a median. That's what's ideal. So it would, while we take into cognizance all the differences in the realities, urbanization, the rural areas, and all of that, we also have to note that it should be a median rate that would apply to everyone.
Thank you very much. Even if there are options there for slow death and all of those things thrown in on a Tuesday morning, but we get the analogy now. Chibuzor, good morning to you.
Good morning, Omas. Good morning, Omas. Good morning, Lagos.
Okay.
Good morning.
So you might want to you have something you might have sprinkled in 30 seconds into this national conversation that is taking across the country, minimum wage.
I think we are not expecting the chicken and egg situation when it comes to infrastructure, because when you need proper infrastructure, be it social or be it what economy or social, to alleviate some of the pressure of the people. So if you have a good transport system, you spend less on transport is more efficient. Electricity is there, you're more productive, you can plan, you can pay what you need for what you need, instead of having to use the alternate sources of power that are more expensive. The reality is how many of the states can afford to pay, the component units can afford to pay. But also there's a bit of hypocrisy in some of the discussions, in some of the arguments, because the same states who say that, Our earning power is not uniform across board. Sit down and hear fact based on some interesting formula, population and stuff. So you have to both earn and gain, but also increased earnings means people can spend more, means government can tax more, means you can stimulate spending in the real sectors, means companies can have more money, and means companies can be taxed more. So it's a chicken and egg, but guys in charge of the economy need to look at what do we need at this time strategically. It's not just throwing stuff around.
Even though I know some persons might say, even if the light becomes stable for 24 hours, people would begin to sleep more. It doesn't mean that some persons might get creative, but we'll leave that conversation.
You sleep for how much you can pay for. If you want to sleep with it, if you can pay for it, fine.
Chibuzor, this story is connected now to the minimum wage we're just drifting away from. So I'd like you to just go all in for this, cut into the fat of this for us now. Because your determination to sleep more determines how you can pay it, bouncing off of what you've said. So the Punch newspaper tells me here that Lagos vows to enforce monthly rental policy. How dare you sleep when you've not paid yearly? Talk to us about this.
So this comment was made by the special advisor to the Lagos State Government Housing, Barakat Odunuga Bakari. And she's talking about the implementation of the monthly rents for accommodation across Lagos. Conceptually is a great idea, and it's I use the word conceptually very loosely. And I'm going to tell you, I'll just quick story. Some years back, when I wanted to take my first place after when I left my parents, and I wanted to go, and that was when just shortly after the former governor of Lagos State had passed the annual rental fee. So obviously I had
the Raji
Fashola sign. And I wanted to go and get my rental. I got a good place to rent, went, and all of a sudden, when we found out was that the average rents had increased across board because landlords and agents specifically looked at it and Nigerians are very ingenious when it comes to finding solutions to problems. So instead of getting the 2 years that they could get, what they did was we're going to get 1 year, but we're going to increase the cost. So my landlord basically then gave me two options. See, or pay 2 years, or pay 1 year, which was slightly above the 2 years, if I split the 2 years into two. I took the 1 year option because it looked like it made sense to me and it was just a startup place. But by the time I got to the agent, the agents were asking for 2 years agency fees, which is, and I'm sure a lot of Lagosians can, have the similar experiences. Now, when we look at house rents, there are various components into how house rents are determined. In Nigeria and Lagos, it's almost like you lose the system. I don't think there's an actual formula evaluation, just feeling. So inflation has gone up, cost of living has increased. My neighbor yesterday has increased the price of his house. Everybody, the landlords get together as a cabal, they all increase their rent. Most times it's triggered by the agents to come and tell you, okay, your place is too large, we're going to split it into two and charge the same amount. So we really don't have much regulation on the rental fees. And what I suspect would happen when we go into the that instead of it being the current 1 year split into components, into 12 units, you probably be spending a lot more than you'd have paid 1 year, which might be fine if, depends on how you allocate your income at the end of each month. There's also a challenge. I remember when I raised this once with a friend and we're just discussing, it's like, who's going to do this 1 month? Imagine if you don't have a job in between, you left accommodation and so on. And that's also a real concern for a lot of people because when they take their money, they look for the option that at least for the next 1 year or 2 years, I'm not thinking about what I'll sleep, even if I don't have what to eat. So, whatever is going to be put on the table, there needs to be options. There needs to be some level of flexibility. The state government also needs to look at itself and say, how can we help reduce or manage the cost of accommodation? You can't do that when in the last year, there's been an increase every component of housing. So I was doing a survey last year in the property. And I think I started up with about 400,000, which was what was quoted to me. I dilly-dally till the end of the year, and the guy was saying he couldn't collect the money again, that their prices had gone up. By the time early this year, I got a review slip of about 1 million for the survey. And the other various components that fit into your COVs. So on one hand, the state government is chasing the land use. Then you're looking at the last use charge. The state government is chasing additional revenues, which increase the cost of those houses in quotes, the cost of maintaining those buildings or even building those buildings. And you now want to push forward a monthly thing that is going to reduce that in the minds of landlords or the agents, whoever is managing these buildings is going to reduce their revenue at the given point. So we need to look at it and think about this problem systematically. How do we balance our needs with what we want to achieve socially? We can't just declare these things and go out and say we're going to force it down. There was an interesting comment by the special advisor where she said, "Oh, we want to make people pay what they earn." And I'm laughing. How do you determine? If I choose to live in a particular area that is described as highbrow, that I'm possibly breaking my back to pay because I like the facilities and amenities there. Does that reflect how much I earn? Or are you going to get my tax slip on the computer and say, landlord, this is how much this man is going to pay because this is what he earns. What percentage I think that? So I'm also careful about, public officials have to be careful about what they promise and say. It's not all politics. We need to be able to distill between politics and reality on the ground. But I'd like to see how they push this forward and how it comes to life in reality. But hey, it's going to be a big challenge.
Oyeyemi, I know you have something to say about in regard. Let's see the absence of regulation, effective regulation in terms of even not just in house rents and all that, in our economy. What does this say about the inflationary? Just look at the price of cement, and recently how even landlords have also said, even for houses existing before these rates went up, they said it becomes a yardstick.
So I think Chibuzor has beat the meat of the conversation, right? But what you say is at the core of the problem, right? The lack of coordination in terms of laws, the lack of coordination in terms of even how things are measured, right? How these indices are measured. I can build a house today and call it 500 million. No one stops me. There is nothing. Even in the 90s, in the olden days, there used to be schedules to the law that provided minimum rental costs and rental prices, right? And that's been phased out, or it's not applied. It's there, but it's not applied. So I think we need to look at regulation more intently. But there are two sides to the coin, right? There are two sides to the coin. People are making investments to make earnings. They're not making investments for social projects. It's not for good, right? And so if that's the case, if you torpedo everything with regulation, what you would have is there will just be a season, there'll be a freeze, there'll be a market freeze. And what you can even induce there is you can start inducing market manipulation, right? Which will not be consumer focused. So I think the regulators that need to be involved here, both regulators from property regulators to consumer, the FCCPC, right? The consumer protection regulators, right down to also those who manage the processes, as Chibuzor said, the survey planning, the land registration, all of those things have to be coordinated for us to arrive at a good spot.
Oyeyemi, while you're going to look at the Vanguard in a short while, there's something you scratched already in responding to these rental policy, and which I'd like Chibuzor to just sum up for us in about a minute, if you can. So, if it is seeming like she said, we don't invest because it is a social good. It's we want to make profit out of it, right? That's on the table. So now we factor that into an economy which you call capitalist. So even in those societies where it's capitalist, isn't there regulation where people can pay monthly and weekly for rent in places?
So there is some level of regulation. There are things like even from the guys who manage the prices of the houses, how they, you don't just become you don't become an estate agent. There is a certificate. You go through a process. You learn to do valuation. Property values increase and decrease. Not in Nigeria where even if the house is sinking, the price is increasing. There's a logic to the madness. Here in Nigeria, there's really no logic. Like you said, I can wake up today and build up my house, it's 500,000, and it's facing the bridge, where there's heavy traffic. Because of desperation, some people will pay. And once one person pays in the street, the rest of the landlords will go and say, you know what? Somebody's charging 500,000 million. All of us are going up to 500 million. Everybody has to pay. So in those countries, like she said, there are stricter regulations. There is, you don't just become something because you feel like there is no job. There is a process. There are certified people. There's valuation. There's planning. There's a lot of I'm thinking of the word.
Okay, the word I
There's
used
a
to
lot,
know.
there's a lot of thought put in. There's a lot, it's systemic.
Yeah.
So you can plan it, you can regulate it, even when there are things like you can actually incentivize some of these things. You can say, oh, I'm going to give an incentive for you to build because there is a social need for us to build. So you might not get the land
Fantastic.
user charge for a period of time if you're going to build this.
Absolutely.
See, there's a meeting point
Absolutely.
now. See the point now. Okay, we'll rest it here because we know that we're going to get conversations coming in as messages now on 0809-444-0981 reacting to any of the story. I see messages piling up. I'll get that to shortly. But the Vanguard, it's coming with the headline: the Federal Safety Corps (FRSC) declares a nationwide war against overloading and night travels once again. Speak to us what the story is all about.
It's urgent. It's an urgent directive, and it's good that they're taking note of it or prioritizing it. On the average, the number of, this was in response to a particular accident, right? Where out of 40 people, over 17 died on the spot, with 28 with different levels of injury. So it doesn't make sense. We're losing human resource capital where there's social issues coming out of that. The truth about it, though, right, is there are reasons why people overload, right? People are moving goods and products across different states. People are trying to be efficient in the madness, trying to fill the gap of our infrastructure. If we had cargo trains, for instance, you wouldn't even need people to do those kinds of things. You wouldn't even be at risk of overloading. Cargo would just move across states without issues. And then they have landing ports, right? So those are some of the things, especially because what inflation has done to us in the last 3 years is minimize the capacity of our real sector. These are the kinds of investments made across states that can immediately shore up the capacity of the real sector and enable us have efficiency. And we won't even have to discuss overloading, right? So again, back to where we started.
Yes.
For you to move, you must be efficient. For us to be efficient, there must be capital investment. Why are we overloading trucks? And with goods and people, we're simply just crossing the road to establishing a cargo line will save us the hassle. That's what we need to be looking at.
I would like you to quickly chip in. So we also got around night travel. If you were a productive economy, you would actually night travel would even be some of the things that would pay because people would need to get to one point or the other, need to meet up with their appointment. You cannot. The reason why you have issues with night travel, and you say about speeding, all that, there are speed breakers that they were supposed to have implemented years ago for mass transit buses and long distance buses. Are they implementing? Are they followed up on that? How are the buses that get on those long distance trips in managed? Most of the issues around night travel is the same thing: lack of infrastructure. Your roads are bad. There are no lights on the road. A lot of these things are the same hands of the same people who are complaining about it. See, Nigerian NDAs, if are people in charge of regulations, should be serious about the business they are doing and stop pushing responsibility back on the citizens all the time.
So again, the corporate and the central theme, a thread running from the stories we're looking at this morning, the absence of effective regulation is seeming to run across the stories. But let's go across to the messages we've got waiting now. I've got Aderibigbe Rexy from Surulere says, with the devaluation of the Naira and the quadrupling of the FAC allocations, no state can say they can pay at least 100,000 minimum wage. Rexy from Surulere. So it seems, Oyeyemi, Rexy was in that meeting where you were having a pre-conversation somewhere. But let's move on. Tony from Marindage says, there is the saying, your actions speak so loud, I can hardly hear what your voice is. Very true. How would the government convince Labour there is no money when the politicians are seen living large? Expensive fleets and large convoys, houses worth billions, open righteous living among officials of government and legislators in cars of over 140 million naira each. Labour knows much about our revenue. Don't need to be told. Government should be open-minded and sincere with the views during the public discourse. That's what is come across saying this morning. And next, I find that's Shegun's message waiting already. Dollar was rising, prices were rising. Dollar is falling, prices are not coming down. It's not all about government. So you see, regulation again comes across. So why do we defy economic logic in this country?
There are short-term and long-term increases. So.
Okay. Let's go. Ajayi Oloniluwa's message is waiting here. It tells us this. It says, I'm waiting to see how the Lagos state government will enforce its proposed monthly policy in the midst of the present galloping inflation. Tenants must now brace up for the monthly increase in rent if the policy should come to effect. Ajayi Oloniluwa from Magodo, GRA Sherry. Now, Julakbe says, Aziz comes in, Afiz. I have a drastic solution to the housing challenges in Nigeria, especially in Lagos. Tax empty and unoccupied houses, and the government would worry less about the monthly rental issues.
Absolutely.
Does this cut it? It does. It looks like something. Okay.
It makes sense. It does. It was one of the points, so time didn't make us make it.
Okay.
Certainly.
Okay, so who's got the next one? Let's go over to Chibuzor. This next one is from Vanguard. We're racing out now for time. Hardship. Federal government to begin nationwide distribution of grains. Would this, in effect, give some cooling water to the temperature of the system right now?
So the Minister for Agriculture and Food, that's Senator Abubakar Kyari, has talked about the release of 42,000 metric tons of grains approved by the president across the 36 states of the federation. They are seeking for, they are saying they're going to work hands in hand with NEMA and DSS, which is one of my pet peeves with this issue. We have abused, in my view, and I'll choose in my opinion, we have abused the use of the DSS. If we want to distribute grain, we're talking about the use of the DSS. You know, people say, well, because of these economic issues, there are several police units that are empowered to do that work. Let's keep it to the police. Let's keep it people who are accountable to the laws of the land and should be able to follow it strictly according to the text of the Constitution. This thing is not rocket science. When we come in NEMA is for disaster relief. Fine. You know, it speaks to one of the major problems. How do you determine who needs this grain? Who do you know, and that's one of the things we want to bring in DSS for. But for me, it's a bit of a problem. You need to know who you are going to give. So it comes back to national identification. Do you have data of who's here, who's named, who's indigent? They've set up various committees to identify people, to get people. I do pray and hope that it gets to the right people who need this intervention quickly. And it doesn't get to the hands of people who just want to take it, keep it, and use it for political interventions later in the day, and not social interventions, because that's what we tend to see in this country. I wish all the best. They say they also have about 50,000 metric tons that they are trying to get the millers, rice millers, and grain millers to release to stabilize the prices. All well and good. I'm one of these people asks how much we really have in our strategic reserves. That's a big question for me. How much of it are we releasing for these interventions at this time? How are we planning it? Those are questions for the people who manage this, because these are not unending or bottomless pits of grain.
Oh yeah, I mean, you'd have to take a stab at this, even at the nick of time for us as we live. Banks involved in 70% of financial crimes. That's the EFCC indicting the banks, according to the Punch. Could you cut this for us in about less than a minute? You're muted.
I don't know about the 70%, but I am aligned with that conclusion. The nature of infiltration that you see, the level of the mere size of even these fraud events show that certainly there's internal collusion between either delegates or employees of the banks or people who are, it doesn't make sense. So there's certainly internal collusion that needs to be investigated to bring it to an end, because it's not working.
So we go over to some messages as we close up the conversation, and we say, Bode is here with the message on this issue of rent and housing. Old house landlords increase rent every year in some areas and claim the excuse for it is the increase in building materials. And you wonder, well, what's your business with, especially knowing you live in an old house that has not even been improved anywhere that you see so far since you entered? I've got Joseph Menye's message waiting. The government should ban these so-called property agents who are the real nightmare to intending or existing tenants. They are the bane why housing rentage is extremely expensive, because they do a lot of round tripping and collude with the owners to outrage for outrageous rents. That's what he says, and he's in tears right now about that. And Tunji's message is here. It's simple. In a market where the supply of rental accommodation cannot meet demand, the sellers, i.e. landlords, determine everything. The solution is not regulation. The investment in housing is the issue. We're serious. We have got a serious housing deficit. I see Gilbert's message. Ibukun's message is here also. Edimopuz, I see your message. Chris Momodo, I see you. But we say thank you so much for being such great company. Oyeyemi Aderibigbe, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
And I say thank you so much to Chibuzor Nwaezeapu for your time also.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you very much.
And to everyone now, I'm taking you the next place we're meeting will be inside the grapevine. Lots of entertainment just to come. Stay tuned to Smooth 98.1 FM. Good morning.